DW Conversations. Usahang katungod, usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristoryahan ka ang kinahanglan ng pag-iristoryahan. DW Conversations.
Good morning everyone. Kumusta ka mo? Today is Thursday. It is the 15th of December. It is the eve of the Misa de Gallo. Unina kasi kaagahon matikang na iton aton mga misa, no? Misa de Gallo. Iton aton early morning mass. Kuan ini mga kasangkayan baga kuan ini gini-expect naton ini nga yana damo talaga iton mga anining ba, no, especially nga kuan ini after pera ka duha ka tuig almost, no, nga may ada kita mga ano ini restrictions sanglit kuam kita kumbaga makurihayhad to, no. May kita igintatakda nga mga kadamo ining tao nga pwede kumadtuhan mga simbahan asya ini nga kuan talagod dila hadto yana iba na, no. Dinhi aton iton aton parokya, the Cathedral Parish, iton aton Misa de Aguinaldo, yung from 16 to the 24th. May ada hini schedule din ha cathedral nga dito iton magkaiba-iba nga mga kapilya. 4 AM din ha cathedral, 4:30 AM ha kalingat ngan, 4:30 AM ha siha, 4:30 AM ha katian, tapos 5 PM ha kalikuan, 5 PM ha litbutan, 5 PM ha suhutan, 5:15 PM at the cathedral, 6:30 ha San Gabriel hitong gabi, 6:30 asya kayo yung schedule at sa 6:30 PM and then 6:30 PM ESPPO. And yung midnight mass natin at the cathedral will be at 10 o'clock in the evening on December 24. And at the same time, may ada hini baptism, may ada hini pamuniyag. So, at least, no, dito hiton aton mga chapels, dito hiton magkaiba-iba natin nga mga barangay, may dito na ka magpipinaharayo, no? Iton iba gabi, iton iba kaagahon, iton schedule iton misa. And even on Christmas Day, may ada gihapon mga schedule of masses dito hiton iyo mga tagsa-tagsa nga mga kapilya. Kan kung makita ka mo on Facebook, iton aton iba-iba nga mga parishes nagpagawas na gihapon hiton ira schedule of masses for the Misa de Aguinaldo. Ikaduha, may ada public committee meeting kaupod iton mga taga Isamelco nga iba pa nga mga stakeholders dito inihiton sang kuni ang panlalawigan. Pinangungunahan ni Attorney PJ Ivardone, Board Member PJ Ivardone, Chairman hiton Committee on Energy, nida naman hiton aton sanggunian. Yan na ini nga adlaw, alas 2 hiton kulop, sangguniang panlalawigan session hall. Ano iton agenda, hinhining nga committee meeting, one ini inquiry in aid of legislation on the recurring and persistent power outages and rotational brownouts in different parts of the province amid the rising cost of electricity in Eastern Samar. So, dida hiton Facebook page ni Board Member PJ Ivardone, you can comment, no? You can write what hiton mga karuyag nimo ipakiana, no? And they will do the asking for the people. May adag hapon niragin imbitar because this is a public committee meeting. Kay because gidako iman ini nga issue ha aton nga tanan. No, dako ini nga issue ha aton nga tanan kay ini nga pagtaga kuryente talaga dako ini nato na problema. Parang tanong, hindi ba pwedeng walang brownout sa in one day? Di ba pwede di pumarang baton. Di pumarang kada adlaw talaga for whatever reason. And I think maaram kay ton rason ada pag hinay-hinayo namang kunta pagbilngi hiton ini kabatunan. So solusyon. Yan na daman nga adlaw mga kasangkayan na kuan ini minamarkahan naton iton ikalima 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. This is ikalima ka tuig tikanghan pagkahibalik hanli mga lingganay habalangiga. The return of the bells, of course inabot ini, remember after pira ka tuig, more than 100 years dito ha Estados Unidos iginbalik ini nga mga lingganay nga hinaman ha aton nahibalik ini nga Pilipinas December 11 of 2018 iginbalik ngadto ha Balangiga niya naman han December 15 of 2018 dako adton nga dako adton nga event of course kuan ini maiya nga gin-irestoryahan hapagaya na iton usa na yan nga ginpapaniguruhan amo naman iton pag malaka himuhin belfry kampanaryo para ini nga mga lingganay magamit na talaga para iton iya ang nga katuyuanan diri la para maging tourist attraction nga hapagaya na amo iton na hinanabo kundi para gamiton dida simbahan hiton pagtawag hiton mga tawo pagpahinumdum hiton ira mga buruhaton dito ha simbahan. Okay, asya ini iton napaka-importante nga ginpapaniguruhan ha pagkaya na mahimuan ini it's the 5th year tapos ada la iniyahan iya dati pang kinamumutngan. I remember hadton at sentay di ba an former President Ramos nagpahimo inihiya in anticipation of the arrival of the bells during his term nagpahimo adton hiyahin belfry so I don't know siguro yan kasi binutngan daman siguro ini ginagamit yan kinahanglan nga haw magpa himo a few weeks ago nakanhihira Mr. Sunny Sampayan nganhi Abner Mercado people who were also instrumental in the return of the bells una by raising awareness bahinhin nga mga lingganay ikaduha an paniguro talaga ni Sir Sunny pira ka dekada daman an ira pag pinaniguro pag lobby etc para mahibalik ini nga mga lingganay and later we will be replaying at an interview ira which we aired a few weeks ago. Let's take a break, we will be back.
VW Conversations. It's about people. It's about issues. It's about us. VW Conversations. Usahang katungod, usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristorya ita ang kinahanglan pag-iristoryahan. VW Conversations.
Pamalandong hiunongahan kalibungan o ecology. Ni Pope Francis, di dahil iya encyclical nga gingaranan Laudato Si, nagsiring. Ang krisis sa kalibungan, usa nga panawagan ngadto hin pagbag-o hin kinabuhi. Ang nga tanan, nagkikinahanglan hin ecological conversion o pagbaguhan aton relasyon hakalibungan, diinan aton pagkilala kan Kristo, aton iging papahayag, didahan aton pagtimangno han kalibungan. Makapulong ni Pope Francis, ikang Laudato Si, numero 217.
VW Conversations. It's about people. It's about issues. It's about us. VW Conversations. Usahang katungod. Usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristorya ita ang kinahanglan pag-iristorya. VW Conversations.
Back on VW Conversations. Again, today is the 15th. Katunga na, and it is 10 days before Christmas. Again, uninahit kaagahon, iton pagtikang iton mga misa di Aguinaldo dinhi ha Borongan Cathedral alas 4 iton misa. Hopefully, diri mag-inuran. Okay, ngandara nga yan na nga adlaw. No? Importante ini, in 2018, nakato kita habalangiga to cover han arrival, and now who is now a professor at the University of the Philippines, no? An era experience, didahan paniguro, panlimbasog nga mahibalik ini nga mga linggaran.
VW Conversations. It's about people. It's about issues. It's about us. VW Conversations. Usahang katungod. Usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristorya ita ang kinahanglan pag-iristorya. VW Conversations.
Good morning mga kasangkayan. This is VW Conversations. I hope that everyone is okay. Maram ka mo mga kasangkayan na nga adlaw, napakaswerte natin. Diri mag-iiha kasi yan nga December. Ginmamarkahan natin yan pagkahibalik ang mga lingganay han balaniga. Katariwan hin kamaiha nga mga tuig na paghininyato natin, nahibalik ini ngani nagkakamayada kita duha nga mga selebrasyon pagkakasetyembre, and then idahitong Disyembre, gin sa salinpurog itong simbahan, itong pagkahibalik kini nga mga lingganay. Pero maram ka mo, may ada ini, madamang nga mga istorya nga, waray kahi istorya, waray kahi gawas, didahan na kalabay nga mga tuig, particular didahan pa nga inabot ini nga mga lingganay nga ni, may ada mga istorya nga, wara kahi sumat, and siguro yan na, asya na iton panahon para mahi-istoryangan, mahibaroan niyo nga tanan. Diri la iton mga estihanan kay, diri la mga taga-Eastern Samar ang nagpinaniguro para mahibalik ini. Actually, di nga akan dudo nga kahampang diin mga taga-niniha aton ha Eastern Samar. Pero, gidadakui ang ira parte, gidadakui ang ira mga paniguro para mahibalik adun nga mga lingganay. So, magmi-mix-mix lang kita mga kasangkayan. We have here Mr. Sunny Sampayan, who is a retired US Air Force. And then, of course, Sir Abner Mercado. Sino naman ang hindi nakakakilala? Sir nga kayo, chance ako naman pakapag-interview yan na. Kinasa nga kilalang journalist, no?
Ako naman ngayon ang may interview. Dati ako nag-i-interview, Ma'am Eden.
Pero alam mo, mas ano yan eh, mas exciting.
Yes.
Parang, anong gagawin mo? Dati taga-tanong ka, ngayon ikaw ang tatanungin. So, anyway, thank you very much for taking time na magkakwentuhan tayo hindi masyadong mag-English ba, Sir Sunny, no? But we can do it in a mix,
Sure.
ano. So, maram ka magsangkay. Most of you do not know, I know, si Sir Sunny, he really worked hard behind the scene, no? For the recovery of the bells. Diri la sa duha ka tuig, but maraming taon. Sir, kwentuhan mo nga kami, paano ito, I mean, ano ba yung reason kung sobra yung efforts ninyo when in fact you are not from Eastern Samar, and parang pamagsangkan Sir Sunny is not a Catholic, no? At ganito nga mga linggana, yung gintatag iya ito hansimbahan nga Katolik. Kwentuhan mo nga kami, sir, kung anong mga events
Yes, ma'am.
that led you to this.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to your program,
Thank you.
along with of course, my dear Mr. Mercado here. But ako naman po, when I was stationed sa Europa, I started in about I think it was probably about 1993, maybe anyway, so 1993 I think was when I was over in Europe. I was attending a commander's call, and then our commander sabi niya po, you are the unofficial ambassadors of the United States of America, and we expect that you, as the unofficial ambassadors, to go out there and make better relationship between our communities and our allies. So, like, when I heard that, it's like, oh my goodness, like, I never thought myself as an official ambassador. So when this issue came up, and of course the World War II veterans issue, they both came up at the same time because they both came up in 1997, 1998 timeframe. So then ako talaga like, oh my goodness, I'm a Filipino born first and foremost. So I have the Filipino heart, syempre. So I said to myself, you know what? My colonel said that we are unofficial ambassadors, so maybe I can use the Filipino side in me and maybe improve the relationship between our two countries. So that's what got me started, because I did lobby for the World War II veterans. I went to Congress, knocked on doors, lobbied for their benefits. And then, of course, I also went to U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate, even the White House, lobbied for the return of the church spell. So that's what got me involved, because I was reminded that I am an official ambassador of the United States of America. That's what started.
In the first place, how did you get to know about the bells? Kasi dito nga sa Eastern Samar, yung younger generation, hindi nila alam about the bells.
I did not know anything about the bells myself until I read an article in one of the Filipino American newspapers in San Francisco, I believe it was. And I read in that article about the plight of the World War II veterans. And then on that same article, they were talking about the Balangig bells. Like, what's that all about? I mean, of course, nobody ever told me what the Balangig bells was all about. As I returned to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, I learned more and more and more. And then, of course, I learned more about the World War II veterans. I learned more about Balangig bells, and of course, I learned more about my country, the Philippines. So that's what got me started. And the more I did more research, the more I got involved in it. And then, next thing you know, I was writing letters to Congress, writing letters to senators, and then eventually made my trip to Capitol Hill and started knocking on doors. And we made some progress, but every time we made progress, there was always the Wyoming veterans, or the delegation from Wyoming. They have always blocked the return of the bells. Every time the bells issue came up, they would insert a rider to prevent the bells from being returned. And that went on for, I don't know how many years, or maybe how many decades. So we spoke with our veterans colleagues in Wyoming. I went up to Wyoming in 2004. And some of them actually voted for the return of the church bells. The vote, I believe, was 7-4, 7 in favor, 4 against, that the United States should return the church bells. And then while we were continuing the process, the 4 made the effort to stop the church bells from being returned, and then subsequently, the bells were never returned home. And then, of course, there's a thing called NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. This is part of what Congress do. They legislate, and what they do in the NDAA is they put a rider on a defense bill. They insert a line in there that's basically prohibits the return of the church bells. So that's what we're faced with for so many years. And then once that end came, then once they have an inclination that we were going to continue lobby for the return, then they would go ahead and contact their lawmakers and again put a rider to the NDAA, which again extended the prevention of the church bells from being returned. So that's what happened in Congress.
So, sir, anong taon nag-start yung efforts? And then how did you get in contact with yung mga pari, bishops, and other people from the Diocese of Boronga?
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. I started in about 1997, 1998, I think it was. And because of what happened, and let me kind of back up a little bit here. I spoke with my veterans colleagues in Wyoming. What I learned subsequently to the initial contact was that the veterans in Wyoming, they were prepared to return one church bell and keep the other one. But what had happened was there was a film documentary that was shown in Wyoming to the veterans, and the film was called Savage Acts, and it showed what the Americans did to the Filipino people. And of course, you show something that negative, it got the veterans riled up. So at the conclusion of the showing of this documentary, the veterans, instead of supporting the one for one, they lobbied their lawmakers and prevented the return of any church bells. So basically, that's what happened. And of course, there was a cooling off period up until about 2000, maybe 2002. We realized that, okay, that rider on the NDAA is no longer in effect. So we'll go ahead and get a jump start. So I asked my colleague, Miss Yolanda Stern. So we had a meeting in California with Miss Jean Wald. Miss Jean Wald's father, of course, was a survivor of the attack in Balangega with the Company C9 Infantry. And we had a discussion what we should do, and then subsequently, we later asked Yolanda Stern to go fly to Balangega and meet with Bishop Medroso. So that's how we got started.
And matagal na ito.
Yeah, this was about 2000, maybe 2002 time frame. So we've always, from that point on, we developed a strategy on how we should do this. And then, of course, we had asked Bishop Medroso to come to Washington, D.C. We went to the White House. We went to the Papal Nuncio's office. We went to the Senate. We went to Congress. We also went to the White House. And then subsequent to that, Bishop Medroso also went to the Vatican. The Vatican, in turn, wrote a letter on Bishop Medroso's encouragement. The Vatican, the Holy See, wrote a letter to the White House and asked that the Vatican supports the return of the church bells. And that letter was sent over to President George Bush. I myself made sure that letter was received by the White House because I got a call from the White House. They said, "We haven't seen this letter. Can you send us a copy?" So I did send a copy of the letter from the Vatican to the White House, and of course, things just got bogged down because there were so many different extenuating circumstances.
So matagal pala to, and the process was very long, and it involved so many people. Sir Abner, ikaw kasi dito sa Pilipinas, I think ikaw ang journalist who wrote more stories, plenty of stories about the Balangega Bells. Bakit po?
Ganito yan. Bago ko makilala si Sunny, teka muna, gusto kong magpasalamat sa pagkakataong ito ko na maimbitahan dito. Pag bumabalik sa Eastern Samar, lalo na dito sa Balangega, at home ako. So ngayon, itong araw na pagpunta namin ni Sunny, parang ito yung unang pagkakataong makita na ni Sunny na dumating na yung, nandito na yung bells, 3 years. Pero ako talagang hinatid ko dito yan noong 2018. Okay, na babacktrack tayo. Ang tanong mo is, bakit? Alam ko na yung istorya bago ko pa makilala si Sunny, na merong kwento ang isang bayan dito sa Eastern Samar, ang Balangiga, na yung mga bells kinuha ng mga Amerikano noong 1901. Okay, nag-away sila. Pagkatapos, 100 taong pangarap nyo na makuha at nangyari nga noong 2018. Ngayon, si Sunny, nakikita niya ako sa The Filipino Channel sa ibang bansa. Nakikita niya yung brand of how I told my story. Medyo na-fascinate siya, nakuha niya yung kung paano. Kasi parang ganito lang yan, Ma'am Eden. Like ngayon, pinagtinitingnan kita, napapassionate ako. Napakasimple mo lang. Nag-i-interview ka, nagkikwento ka. Siguro yun yung nakita ni Sunny. Sabi niya is, would you like to do the documentary version of the Balangiga? Di na pa ganun ako. Paano? Dadaling ka namin sa Amerika. Totoo ba yan? Akala ko nung una baka scam eh. Okay? Pero sumakay ako doon sa proseso, doon sa journey. Talagang nadala niya ako hanggang doon sa loob ng kampo. Kasi yung bells, parang dito sa Pilipinas, hindi siya naka-expose sa plaza na accessible sa lahat. Parang imagine nyo na parang, hindi parang nasa loob siya ng kampo Krami sa Maynila o nasa kampo Aguinaldo, na nasa loob ng kampo talaga, na doon nilagay ng mga Amerikano yon. So narating ko, nabuo ko, doon sa proseso ng paggawa ko noong dokumentaryo, noong kwento, doon ako talagang na-obsess. May something sa puso ko na talagang sabi ko, ay, ano ito, idadasal ko ito, na akala ko hindi mangyayari in our lifetime. Lagi kong sinasabi doon sa, may portion doon na talagang binatingting ko, doon sa dokumentaryo na ginawa ko, na kapag hinanap nyo siya, madali nyo lang makita sa YouTube. Hindi akin yung YouTube channel, sa ABS-CBN yun. Doon nyo makikita yung dokumentaryong mga kampana ng Balangiga. May visual kayo. Sabi ko is, ang sarap pakinggan itong tunog nitong kampanang ito, na kung itong tunog na ito maririnig ng bawat parishioner ng bayan ng Balangiga. Pero alam ko, mangyayari yun. Mangyayari yun. So, yung mga ganun, niro-romanticize ko yung kwento, pero sino mag-aakalang yung salita kong yun, umakyat sa langit, pinagbigyan tayo ng Diyos na ibalik in our lifetime. Diba? Pagkatapos, nung naibalik na nga, talagang minake sure ko, sabi ko dun sa ABS-CBN desk, now you work in this type of news organization, make me home run this story. Ihahatid ko yung bells pauwi ng Balangiga. So sumakay ako dun sa C-130, pauwi dito sa Balangiga, dito sa Giwan Ibinabayon. Alam ng mga taga Balangiga, naging napakalaking kwento nun, piyesta nun sa inyo. Yung buong prosesong yun, Ma'am Eden, maybe in the past, taga Balangiga ako. Ngayon, medyo baka ako maiyak, okay? Maybe in the past, nag-reincarnate ako in a form of a journalist in this situation. Talagang sumakay ako sa panaginip ni Sunny at naiuwi, nandito na ngayon yung mga kampana nyo. Linganay. Okay, bigyan lang kita ng isa pang trivia. Nagtuturo ako sa UP, alam ni Sunny yon. Isa sa mga modules ko is, hindi alam ng lahat na may ganun. Na kapag in-introduce ko sa mga estudyante ko yung kwento ng Balangiga, na-amaze sila na, ay sir, alam namin may ganyan, pero hindi namin alam na yung mga ganitong side story. So it's a continuation saga itong Balangiga, na kahit nandito na sa inyo, meron pa rin tayong mga gagawin.
True. Talagang hindi ko rin alam na may nangyaring Balangiga encounter. I only knew when I was already studying in Manila, nag-field trip yung history class ko sa Ayala Museum, and there was a diorama. It was the first time na nalaman ko about that, kasi hindi naman na ituro sa elementary at sa high school. Gaano katagal yung journey?
Okay, yun sa akin. Okay, behind the scene, 1 buwan yung actual na shooting. Kasi pumunta muna ako dito. Unang-una is kailangan makilala ko yung may-ari ng storya. from the Filipino perspective. Meron kayong event dito na every September dyan sa bayan ng Balangiga, yung Encounter Day, tama? So ako, dokumentarista, kailangan kong i-shoot yung araw na yon, mag-interview ng mga tao, okay? Para mabuo ko yung kwento from the perspective ng mga taga-Balangiga. And then, saka ako lumipad ng Amerika sa tulong ni Mr. Sunny Sampayan, puntahan sa iba't ibang parte ng Amerika yung mga perspective para mabuo ko yung kwento. Si Jean Wall is taga Phoenix, Arizona, so ibang estado yon. Si Sunny na naglalabi kasama ng iba pang mga Pilipino like ni Maria na talagang masinsin sila sa pagkumbinsi sa mga mambabatas doon, taga New York. Okay? Tapos yung ilang veterano doon na nasa Washington. So ano siya, hindi siya madaling gawin. At yung pinakahiniling ko kay Sunny na pinagbigyan niya, kailangan kong makita yung mga kampana. Na nung nakita ko doon sa Warren Air Force Base, talagang tumayo yung balahibo ko. Kaya yung sinasabi ko in the past, taga Balangiga ako, dito ako nakatira noon. Sabi ko, kailangan sana maiuwi ito. At naiuwi naman sa inyo. Tapos, nung magawa ko yun, 1 taon pa bago ko siya naisulat. Kasi, siyempre, sa broadcast, parang ganito ngayon, tinetape muna natin. Hindi agad siya na-ere kasi hindi siya pressing issue that time. Nung nagkaroon siya ng pagkakataong ma-ere, ayun na. Parang kahit paano nagkaroon na ng awareness yung mga tao talaga na merong ganoon. Kaya nung naibalik siya, yung ABS-CBN talagang kumbaga nagamit niya na, okay, kami lang yung nakapunta sa Amerika, doon sa dokumentaryo ni Abner. So, binalikan din namin yung istorya.
May I also add something, man? When I met with, well, I didn't meet Abner first. I placed a call, I think, or I sent him an email. And then I actually said to him, I said, Abner, I would like, if you are available and if you want to do it, I would like to handpick you as the person who will tell the story about Balangiga. And I said, Abner, there are 2 sides of the story about Balangiga, the Filipino side and the American side. I want you to tell it the way it was. So that's how I was able to, work with Abner, and we came up with that documentary. So he did a fantastic job, because he covered all the angles. At the time, of course, the only angle that has not been covered, of course, was the return of the bells, and of course, he made sure that he was on board the C-130 when the bells were being delivered over here. So, but I just want to make sure that your viewers understand how Mr. Mercado was picked for this project.
May tanong ko lang, Sir Sunny, ano ba talaga yung reason kung bakit ang tagal nito? Bakit ayaw ng mga Amerikano ibalik ang Balangiga bells?
Well, that's a very, very difficult question to ask, and very difficult to answer, because there were so many different reasons as to why. But I can tell you that we made any and all the efforts to make things happen. But you have to understand that the NDAA, I believe, is good for 2 years. So once the writer is incorporated to the NDAA, which says you can't send the bills home, then you have to wait for 2 more years. If it was not 2 years, or if it's every 4 years, then you have to wait till 4 years up before you even make that attempt again. Once you make that attempt, the veteran gets wind of it, and then they will ask their lawmakers to block it. So that's the reason why it took so many years. It was not until later, I believe it was 2018, where other peoples have joined in the lobbying efforts. I mean, we had different sectors, from Americans to Filipinos, etc., etc. We all had our efforts into this whole thing. Our one goal was to make sure that the bells are returned. My aim was to make sure that the bells are returned to the church, not to just the Philippines, not for political purposes, but send the bells back to the church where they came from, and they need to be used for what their original reasons was. Ring the bells to call people to worship. That was my my intent all along, was to make sure that those bells are returned back to Balangiga.
And tayo naman also want to make sure that nobody, not one person, not one group, takes credit for this. No, gidamong nga mga tao and gidamong nga organisasyon, and it took decades, no. So this return of the bells cannot be and will not be, should not be credited to one person. Si kuan na nagpauli, and that is not true, no. Kasi there were times, no, parang the past years, sabi, oy, ibabalik na yung bells. And then all of a sudden, nawawala na naman tayo. Why all of a sudden, dyan sa 2018? Kasi parang, actually, ako nabigla din ako because I thought, sabi nga ni Sir, it was not going to happen in our lifetime. All of us parang nabigla lahat.
Yes. Let me just kind of back up a little bit here, because my understanding, according to my contacts in Washington, D.C., was that the President of the United States had given the verbal order to have the bells returned. And of course, we were making that progress. We were making the preparation and everything to make things happen. And unfortunately, the Wyoming delegates got wind of it, that we were making the efforts. It was going to be announced in June, I can't remember exactly what year, that when the Philippine president went to visit the United States, that the bells would be, hopefully it would be almost returned by that point. But then once the Wyoming delegates found out about it, they inserted another writer into the NDAA. So, but then of course, like I said earlier, maraming tulong-tulong talaga mga either Filipinos, Americans, from different walks of life. They lobbied for the return of the church bells, and then at some point you have the secretaries, the Secretary of Defense Matis, and of course Secretary of Defense Lorenzana. I don't have the full knowledge of what took behind closed doors, but I knew for a fact that I told Secretary of Defense Lorenzana, I said, Mr. Lorenzana, Secretary Lorenzana, I said, I'm struggling again with the Wyoming delegates because now they're trying to block the church bells from being returned. And then he said, Sonny, I just met with Secretary of Defense Mattis in Singapore yesterday. He assured me that those bells will be returned. When he mentioned that to me, I said, like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a light. And it's the cooperation is what we need, is the cooperation between our countries, the Philippines and the United States. If we have that full cooperation, I think we can do limitless things we can do a lot of things in life. We can do a greater cooperation between our two countries. So I think that was a big obstacle, by the way. That was a big obstacle. The veterans either didn't know it or they still don't know it. I keep telling them that was a major obstacle in improving the relationship of our two countries. I said to them, once the bells are returned, I think we will see a better cooperation between the two countries. I think we will continue to see the progress between the United States and the Philippines that, I guess, as far as economic agreement, as far as defense agreements as well too, I think we will see a continuation of improving cooperation between the two countries. I see that coming. Yeah.
For the both of you, ano ba yung naramdaman niyo when finally, eto na, the bells will be returned?
Ako, Ma'am Edith, talagang sabi ko nga kanina, ginusto kong ma-home run siya, maibalik ditong ako mismo yung makakakitang maiuwi na siya. Nung inabangan ko siya sa Villamor Air Base, nagduda pa ako baka ang ibabalik ng mga Amerikano replica lang. Pero hindi, nung binubuksan na yung crate, itinataas na, lukso ng dugo.
Kasi
nakita ko siya, sabi ko, ay, ito yun. No doubt, ito yung nakita ko sa Wyoming. Salamat sa Diyos, binalik talaga ng mga Amerikano. So yun yung talagang immediate na naramdaman ko nung nakita ko siya sa Villamor na itinataas yung mga bell, inililitaw publicly. Kasi kung matatandaan nyo po, 15 nyo pala dito sineselebrate itong pagbabalik ng mga bells. Pero technically po, December 11 po siya uling tumapak
sa Pilipinas.
2018. Kasi nagtatlong araw pa siya sa Villamor Air Base Museum publicly para naman yung mga taga Metro Manila na gustong makita siya, makikita siya. nakakatuwa kasi grabe yung pila noon. Lahat talaga ng tao pumupunta ng Villamor Air Base Museum para makita na, ito yung bell. So, ito yun. Talagang kumbaga, nabigyan natin ng nabigyan natin ng awareness din yung mga Pilipino nung time na pauwi siya na may ganitong kwento ang mga taga-Eastern Samar, may ganitong kwento ang mga taga-Balangiga.
Ikaw, Sir San.
Yes, ma'am. Ako naman po, I don't think I'm gonna be satisfied until the church are in their final place. To me, the bells being temporarily on the grounds of the church, to me, is not a completion of the original intended purpose. The bell needs to be rung to call people to worship. Right now, they are in the grounds of the church, and obviously we will need help from the people, your viewers, and until that's done, and until the church, until the bells are on the belfry, I will not rest until we have the support to build that belfry pole. When those bells are on the belfry, then I can salute smartly and said, okay, we did our job, and at least now the church and the community can actually hear those bells from, and hopefully one of these days I'll be able to actually ring those church bells. Yeah.
Pero is it the first time, was it your first time like this morning to see the bells back in the Philippines?
Yes, that was the very first time ever since. As a matter of fact, I've only seen, before today, ma'am, I've only seen 2 bells. The one in Wyoming. I never saw I knew about the
That's
bell in
in
Korea.
Korea.
Yes, but I never actually laid my hands or eyes on it. I've seen photos, but that's the extent. Today, seeing those 3, parang magkakapatid po, they were adopted by different, we call it. So now they're all together, and it's great to see that at least now that all the bells are together, and I'm looking forward to Sunday when maybe I should hear the bells being rung for the very first time.
From the belfry.
Very first time, exactly. And I hope we will be able to ring more than 1 church bell on Sunday, that we can ring 3 church bells. And when I do have the opportunity to ring those church bells, I also want you viewers to understand, because Filipinos, simply a desperate measure calls for a desperate action, simply. Filipinos were actually taking metal church bells and melting them and turning them into ammunitions. So we need to be grateful. We need to be thankful for what the Americans did of taking these church bells, because if the bells were not taken, they may have been melted and became ammunitions instead. And I don't think a lot of people knew that. So I need to stress that we need to be thankful that the Americans took these church bells, because otherwise they would have probably been melted and there would have been no more Balangiga bells today. So again, I'm looking forward to hearing those church bells from tomorrow.
Sir Abner, ano ba yung, sabi mo pa nga kanina, maybe meron pa rin tayong magagawa para, ang sabi nga ni Sir Sunny, the intent really na babalik siya and then gagamitin talaga siya, hindi lang siya pang museum. Because I remember when ibabalik pa lang yung bells sa Pilipinas, there were some talks na, di ba, some lawmakers nagsuggest na doon lang sa Manila, hindi siya iuwi lagay sa museum to give chance to all Filipinos to see the bells, and then yung iba hindi pwede because the intention really was for the bells to be returned to Balangiga. Ano kaya pwede maitulong natin para makagawa tayo ng belfry and then mabalik na talaga siya?
Bago kami magpunta dito sa programa nyo, nagkaroon kami ng paanyaya mula kay Bishop Marquez dito sa diocese, sa Bishop's Residence. Isa yan sa mga tanong ko, Ma'am Aiden. Kasi kanina habang nagtatanghalian kami, ang mga tanong ko is pang journalistic na tanong. Sabi ko, Bishop, ano ngayon ang plano natin? Kasi nga nandun naka-expose, hindi siya nagagamit sa talagang purpose niya. Maging kampanaryo at lingganay na tagatawag doon sa kung saan siya dapat nakapwesto para yung mga parishioner pupunta. Okay? Ang sinasabi ng obispo is may mga plano, may mga proyekto na magtayo talaga ng kampanaryo. Pero ang challenge, ang hamon is saan kukunin ang pondo. So siguro pwedeng doon tayo magsimula. Ako naman ang sabi ko, Bishop, alam mo kapag sa isang parte ng Pilipinas, nagkaroon ng sakuna, nagkaroon ng kalamidad, laging ang mga parokya sa Maynila may second collection. Ibibigay natin ito sa parting ito ng Naga o ng Eastern Samar o ng Cebu o ng Bohol para doon sa mga nawalan ng tahanan o para meron tayong maibigay na pangkain nila. Ito, nakikita ko na baka pwedeng gawin natin ganun, Ma'am Eden. I-involve na natin ang buong bansa. Kasi tingin ko naman ang may-ari ng kwento ng Balanggiga, hindi lang kayong mga taga-Eastern Samar, hindi lang itong mga kwento ng taga-Balanggiga. Buong bansa, buong sambayan ng Pilipino ang nangarap sa loob ng 100 taon mahigit na maibalik ito. Maliit lang yung bariyang hinihingi ng mga taga-Balanggiga para makonstruct yung kampanaryo. Pwedeng yan, pwedeng sa forma ng social media, manawagan tayo, o yun nga, yung forma ng second collection sa lahat ng parokya, through CBCP ordinance. Maraming tutulong, Ma'am Eden. So ang akin lang is, pagtulong-tulungan natin, yun lang sa ngayon talagang hinihiling ng parokya ng Balanggiga, maitayo na yung kampanaryo. Okay? Para kumbaga, maibalik na natin yung mga lingganay na nandoon na nagagamit sa talagang purpose niya.
Oo. Kasi parang ako from my observation, parang ang nangyayari ngayon, yung unang-una niyang is for tourism purposes. You go there, see the bells, no? And hindi naman talaga yan yung purpose, di ba? Punta ka sa Balanggiga para makita mo yung mga bells. Hindi naman talaga yan yung purpose. The purpose is for it, ilagay sa kampanaryo, pag magmimisa, yun, ang ganda pa naman ng tunog. Di ba?
Yes, solid,
Iba
solid.
ang tunog ng mga bells na yan.
Solid.
Talagang So we are hoping na pagtutulong-tulungan yan para ultimately, sabi nga ni Sir Sunny, we can rest, our hearts can rest. Sabihin na natin, you did a great job, at hindi lang eto talaga, ibinalik talaga siya sa kung saan siya kinuha. Mga sir, thank you very much for your story. Alam mo, ngayon ko lang, ako ngayon ko lang talaga mas naintindihan yung efforts, yung ginawa nyo, Sir Sunny, Sir Abner, at saka lahat ng mga Amerikano, sa mga Pilipino. Kasi nga, uulitin ko, when the bells were about to arrive in the Philippines, ito parang ito ina-attribute lang dun sa isang tao, which should not be. Kasi hindi lang to gawa ng isang tao, hindi lang to nangyari, the negotiation, hindi lang nangyari ng ilang araw, ilang buwan, ilang linggo, but it took decades. Decades.
Yes.
And we owe this mga kasangkayan din ni Eastern Samar, si Sir Sunny, Sir Abner. Nag-ingay sila They did their job really well, and to think that they are not from Eastern Samar. Although yung asawa ni Sir Sunny is from Northern Samar. Kapitbahay. Mga sir, thank you very much for
Salamat,
your time.
Ma'am Eden. Karangalan namin.
Thank you po. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Sir Abner.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat. Ayun nga tanong makasakayan daw mga salamat.
VW Conversations. It's about people. It's about issues. It's about us. VW Conversations. Usahang katungod. Usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristorya ika ang kinahanglan ng pag-iristorya. VW Conversations.
May ada mga kabataan, mga batanon, nga tinatabangan na iton kinabuhi. Damo aira, iton may ada na babarakan, unahadlukan. May ada naman na diri na nga nihin kabuhi. Tungod kay kaira pag-abat o pagtanaw, waray nakarawat una higugma haira. Usahay, ginbabasol pa nga ni nira an ira mga kaanak. Tungod hindamo nga mga problema nga natika nga hawan ira pamilya. Kapag katinuod, maupay itong kinabuhi. Waray mas mamaupay pa kayhan kinabuhi. Kay kung nahiintindihan la, bisan pangani ang mga problema, mga kabarakan, mga ayat o mga challenges, nakakabulig ini base pakusgon an kasing-kasing an kada tagsa o an kinabuhi. An batanon nga nadiri o nga diri naagihin kakurian, natitigurang nga maluya, malubay, oray kusog, ug diri nagiging malipayon. Sanggit ayaw igraot hinbuot kung usahay naagi hindamo nga mga pagsubok han imo kinabuhi. Lugod, pagpasalamat nga buhi ka.
Ito ang abortion, dako nga kasalanan. Pagpatay ito hintaw. May ada mga tao nga nagubuhat hini tungod hin pagkaawod o kundi man tungod hin kakablasan. Kundi iton kaarawdan o kakablasan, guti la nga bahin kundi katandi hin pagpatay hin tao. Waray bisan ano nga rason nga makakapagaan han pagpatay hin tao. Labi na kung ini nga tao usap pala nga baby nga ada hiton sulod hiton tiyan han iya nanay. Tinatawagan ko ang mga kaganak, katigurangan ug mga health workers. Sagduni ug tudui iton iyo mga anak nga diri magbuhat hin abortion. Igpapaambit ko ha iyo ang ginsiring ni Pope Francis. Kay ano nga magsimba ka kung ang mga parupaningba nga tanan man magpagkasasala. Agsubta ini bation. Hapang tinuod ang pagsarinurog han misa diri nangahulugan nga waray niya kasalanan o nga magmaupay hiya kay han iba. Lugod, nakarawat hiya nga nagkinahanglan hiya hin pagbag-o han iya kinabuhi. Nganan kaluoy ug pasaylo han Dios nga nahimo nga tao dida kang Kristo. Kunin usa nga tao naabat nga diri nanginanglan han kaluoy han Dios ug iton iya kasiring nga diri hiya makasasala, mas mamaupay pa nga diri nala hiya sumingba. Nasimba kita tungod kay magpakasasala kita ug nang kinahanglan kita kumarawat han pasaylo han Dios. Kinahanglan naton makiusa didahan buhat han pagtalwas ni Kristo, didahan iya pasaylo.
Bishop David, in the name of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, once described our situation as, being like a frog inside a pot of water and that it is slowly being boiled. If you are a frog in a pot of slowly boiling water, if you do not move, you will die. But you see, I see it a different way. I see our situation as being like people inside a tunnel. You see, in a tunnel, it is dark. But you see, some people love the darkness or have learned to love the darkness. While most of us would love to move to the light, they hinder us from doing so. And so what must we do? Two things. One, we must pray that all people might move to the light, that we must all move to the path of being right, to the path of knowing God's will and doing it. This song is for all of us. Show me a rainbow in the sky, dispel all the darkness from this land, where souls in ringing voices are singing one refrain. Pray for a better world, change for a better world. And our weary faces stop and stare at blood and injustice we can't bear. Searching our hearts, we find that there's only one refrain. Pray for a better world, change for a better world. You and I see them when they cry, the poor and the voiceless hide their eyes. Looks are deceiving, we need to hear their one refrain. Pray for a better world, change for a better world. We're on this earth for a reason, after all, it's our common home. We are meant to fill the world with the truth as flag unfurled. We are meant to shape the world with justice and the love that's from above that we're dreaming of. Pray for a better world, change for a better world.
VW Conversations. It's about people. It's about issues. It's about us. VW Conversations. Usahang katungod, usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristorya ita ang kinahanglan pag-iristorya. VW Conversations.
And we're back on VW Conversations nga nasa rin pa itong WHO nga naglalaom hira nga by 2023 diri na magiging ito yung public health emergency itong COVID-19. So gadman gihapon itong MPOX. What yung MPOX before ang tawag ni monkeypox pero ginliwat na inihan WHO. Sumala pa hiton World Health Organization nga kung i-compare like kan last year 2021 and 2020 iton mga kaso hinamamatay dara hiton COVID-19 kasi meron pa no may ada pa talaga pero iton mga namamatay mga less than ika 1/5 han numbers niya naman han nakalabay nga tuig. Marami pa rin ang COVID-19. Actually, one classic example itong China. Di ba dito China napaka-stricto anira mga palisiya, may ada nira tinatawag yung zero COVID policy. Kay namamay-adala dito mga positive pera katao, grabe ang ira an ira mga restrictions nga igini-impose, di ba? May ada dito mga lockdowns, mga syudad iginla-lockdown, may ada mga residential areas, a whole block or a whole building ginla-lockdown. So gad aton hira ka stricto. Yan na kay kinahanglan naman hira mag-open up turismo, ekonomiya, kinahanglan na nga hawira mag-abre. So may ada na hinhini nga mga restrictions ira na kun baga gimpagaan-gaan na hinanabo nasa ring iton ira mga health authorities dito nahahadag talaga hirahin another surge kasi gidadamu iton tawo they can't keep track no iton mga cases sa pagkayana talaga kasi ira dito ihapla nira nga positive cases yung mga nagpa-positive di dahiton RT-PCR test. Takay most of them in nagra-rapid antigen test. So sa ring panira, diri na nira mahibabaruan hapag kaya na iton iton ungod nga numbers iton mga infected plus gintutugot na iton quarantine and treatment at home bisan hiton mga COVID patients nga guti ay la iton ira mga symptoms. Iton ira fear hini damo kasi iton mga positive who are asymptomatic. Waray nira mga symptoms, no? Ayan na kay waray naman yung mga mass testings diri sugadan una mamay dala usa duha tulo nga nagpa-positive largo nagma-mass testing nga tanan mandatory tag pera every other day gin ang RT-PCR test yan na wala na yan. So iton hira hini fear gidadamo iton mga positive who are asymptomatic nga libre la nga nakakapaglinakat-lakat, libre la nga nakakapag ginawas-gawas. Ibig sabihin andyan yung COVID-19 because it is here to stay, no? Andyan na yan, di it mawawara. But at least may ada na bakuna, ngan may ada na gihapon hini tambal. Ngan usa gihapon han mga lessons iton nga tanan nga mga nahinanabuha at nahinanabo iton kalibutan mag-upay maraot pero may ada leksyon and an usa nga leksyon really is na mahibabaro kita hin pagresponde nga da naman hin sugad nga outbreak nun ang COVID nag-iha-iha antes makabiling hin bakuna ngan tambal nangapa didahan first weeks, first months of COVID, di ka maaram kung mag-aano, but ultimately, nahibaro ang kalibutan kung unan pag-responde. That is why, may ada nga hini isa nga kuan niya na facility, no? Naghihikay inihirahin pondo para mag-create isa nga body nga matutok talaga, mag-aaram, magkakamay-adahin mga mekanismo para hin madagmit nga pagresponde para hin mga future outbreaks because COVID-19 will not be the last nga sakit nga will take us by surprise really. This will not be the last pandemic. May adahin yung mga masunod, maybe didahiton surusunod nga generation. There will be iton importante yan na mahibabaro hiton pag-responde, maaandam iton kalibutan on how to respond, especially nga da hiton mga health emergency. So, hapag kaya na diniha yung WHO, meron pa yan, no? may pakitahin ni Public Health Emergency Declaration. And iton, may adahin ni komitiba dito itong WHO, ngangin aad man na nira, kung tatapuso na ba iton emergency phase of the pandemic? Kung tatanggalin na ba yung declaration of a health emergency, no? Kasi nga ang sinasabi sinasabi nga iton virus diri ini mabaya. Aanhin na ini, no? Ngan kinahanglan iton nga tanan nga mga nasod mahibaro hin pagmaneho kun uunanhon ini i-manage alongside with other respiratory illnesses so kadhiton trangkaso. And napaka damo pa iton mga ayat, dida naman hiton masunod nga mga tuig, especially with regards to COVID-19. Kasi, for instance, when it comes to vaccination, kita din sa Pilipinas, damo na iton aton mga bakunado nga mga tao. Din sa Region 8, nalilipay kita. Nasa ring hi Director Exo sa Balberino nga in Region 8, nasa 86% iton aton vaccination coverage. Pero kagkalawan ta ini iton kanang bugos nga kalibutan nga pagtanaw kasi hikita di man kita nahunong didahin usa nga lugar. Sige man iton biyahe, yan pala sige iton biyahe hiton tawo, darahiton pagtrabaho, darahiton pag-eskwela, darahiton pag-aram. And subay pa hiton WHO nga base hiton ira pag-arad man. Dida hiton mga pobre nga mga nasod, no? Mga kablas nga mga nasod, gihabubuian vaccination coverage because usala hakada 5 nga mga tao ditohin pobre nga mga nasod iton nagpabakuna. So asya ini iton dakot pa nga ayat kasi kung nababakunahan iton mayoriya iton mga tao, okay na yan, at least may ada na kita hini protection, no? But kita we are looking kuan ini forward nga kuan ba mawaray na ini and then we go back to normal. Pero kapag kaya na ngani, di ba? It's almost normal. Diri na ngani damo iton mga nagpaka face mask kasi kuan naman ini gintanggal naman gihapon ini an policy nga mandatory iton pagsulot iton face mask. But nalilipay kita kay may adala gihapon nagsusulot iton face mask. Mindful hira, no? Para iton ira kalugaring nga safety para gihapon iton ibang mga tao. Kita naman na-remind, especially, if you have cold, cough, sipon, ubo, total, nahiara naman kita, almost 3 years, no? Nagsinuluton kita yung face mask. May daangani natin mga sakit, ubo, sipon, mask kita, no? Para hiton aton protection, para gihapon hiton protection, hiton iba. Actually, dara ka nahiara na kita nga pag face mask, kuri na naman itong diri pag face mask. Parang kuan daman ini mga proseso daman yung hinay-hinay nga kumbaga hitbata nga nasusuit yan hinay-hinay nga pagkuan lutas kasi di ba parang kareg na nim gumuwas without the mask pero at the back of your mind mo pala gyap ito na kamask okay lang naman yan diri na may di mamahali yan it's pwede na dito nga ni Japan sige may kira pag sinulutong hiton face mask. Imo anala naton ini nga kaparte hiton fashion. Fashion. Di ba? Urog yan kay winter, paka-winter na naman kita. Balita ba sa kay again unina iton Committee on Energy hiton sanggunang panalawigan may ada ini na public hearing nag-invite ini hirahi iton mga taga Isamelco to shed light on the issue nga kuan reklamo iton damang mga tao ini nga sige, sunod-sunod, mapagpinarong-parong hiton aton kuryente. Thank you very much for being with us today on Beautiful Conversations. Until next time, God bless.
VW Conversations. It's about people. It's about issues. It's about us. VW Conversations. Usahang katungod, usahang kinahanglanon. Pag-iristorya ita ang kinahanglan pag-iristorya. VW Conversation.